So the other day, I went up on a word while I was teaching, and the word is irregularity. When I say I went up on the word, meaning I couldn't find it. Went back into the recesses of my brain, and it just wasn't there. And I'm sure this happens to a lot of people a lot of the time, but for me, I can't recall going up on a word like that. I either know the word or I don't know the word, and I certainly know the word irregularity. So where was it? Well, I made a joke that it was a senior moment, and I'm sure that you have had senior moments as well too, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, I felt like my brain was getting older. I felt like my brain was missing words. Now, probably I'm exaggerating and dramatizing what was just a sign of being tired and overworked and maybe on my 4th hour of teaching in the same day. But it was a moment where I thought, I wonder if this is what it feels like to get older. And I started to think about this. What does it mean to age? What does it mean to get older? There's so many things about it that I love. I feel like I'm much wiser. I feel like I make better decisions. But you cannot really ignore the brutal beast that is Father Time. Aging starts with the loss of lean muscle, loss of mobility, and then, this cognitive decline is something that friends and relatives have shared with me is not unique to me. Little by little, people tend to check out from the world, life, and their world gets smaller and smaller. And that, I guess, is the part of aging that makes me the most worried. I love to swim in the world of ideas, and if those ideas are not on the tip of my tongue, I'm concerned. I'm worried about that. So our guest on this week's show is a gentleman in his 70s who focuses on play as a means of reversing or at least slowing cognitive and physical decline. I like this approach because so many people I meet are not super excited about structured workouts. They're not super excited about going to the gym or the yoga class or the Peloton, get on the Peloton or whatever it is, but they'd love to do something that gets them engaged with their life in their later years. And this concept of play is a really great way for people to get involved in many cases with their grandkids or perhaps your great-grandkids, depending on where you are in life. This concept of never leave the playground, playing with bongo boards, throwing knives, playing jacks with both hands, this bilateral brain exercise is really, really interesting, and he's gotten some really great results. If you're new here, it's the Lucas Rockwood Show. I'm a yoga teacher, trainer, serial entrepreneur. I'm the father of 3 international kids, but at the end of the day, I'm a student and I like to learn. So I use this show as an excuse to go out and meet interesting people who are writing books, sitting on a meditation cushion, thinking deep thoughts, hopefully, and I try to bring their best work here to you. So hopefully we can all live more fulfilled lives. I've canceled all advertising for the show. I just found it kind of annoying to listen to. And so instead, my one ask of you is if you like the show, support me by sharing the show with someone you know. And you can tag me on social media. My Instagram handle is @LucasRockwood. If you have questions for the show, message me, send me a direct message on Instagram. I get all of those myself. And if you're listening on your phone, I would really appreciate a rating and review. What you do is you just scroll down in whatever app you're listening on and leave a rating and review. And one of the more helpful reviews you can leave is if you reference a show that you found valuable. We have this huge catalog now of 400 plus shows, and people don't really know where to start. And there's nothing timely about most of these shows, so people go back and listen to them, and whatever you could do to point people in the right direction would be helpful. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the show. Today's show is called Reverse Aging with Lifelong Play, and I am joined here with Stephen Jepson. Stephen is the creator of a lifestyle he calls Never Leave the Playground. He rides a unicycle, juggles while balancing on a bongo board, throws knives and plays jacks with both hands. He walks on a tightrope. He swam across Iowa's Spirit Lake at age 66, and he's won over 80 gold medals in swimming since the age of 65, and much, much more. After a career in pottery and ceramics, both teaching and creating, he now dedicates his time to researching and practicing this lifestyle, Never Leave the Playground. And you can learn more while you're listening at his site, which is neverleavetheplayground.com. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Lucas. By the way, today I am a a professional speaker. Years ago, I've done a whole lot of different things, college professor, manufactured boats, and various things. But today I am a professional speaker, and I am traveling the world doing exactly what you described.
And Stephen, for people listening, how old are you today in real years, and how young do you feel compared to your peers or the people that you're around?
Well, I'm 76 going on 77. I feel as though I'm in my 20s or up to 20s or 40s or real young. I feel youthful. My balance is keen, and I can do things I can do things today. For instance, I learned to juggle clubs. Do you know what clubs are?
Sure.
I learned to juggle clubs at 74, and I'd been juggling balls since 48. I learned to snowboard at 60. I learned to tightrope walk at about 55 and walk on a loose rope at 64. Do you know what wakeboarding is?
Sure.
I wakeboarded for the first time in my life. Never done such a thing before. I wakeboarded for the first time on November 30th, 2016, just a few months ago.
Wow. Amazing.
Thanks.
And so I guess a lot of people hear this and they think, oh, that's great. He does a lot of tricks, but there's method to this madness, right? So neurogenesis, neuro-plasticity, these are words I've heard you use. These are something that everybody's interested in, health span, lifespan. So aside from, a lot of people listening, they say that's great that he can ride a unicycle and juggle and learn these sports, but I don't really care about that. But they do care about the results of lifelong learning, of lifelong play. So maybe you could just dip briefly into helping people understand this idea of neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, why we should care.
I'm not going to get too technical. And when I'm on stage and talking to an audience, and I've spoken in Denmark and Thailand and Costa Mesa, California, and Indianapolis, and just all over Canada, if I were to tell those people in the audience, and sometimes it's hundreds and hundreds, that they're going to learn to juggle today, or that I was going to teach them to juggle, they would turn me off instantly. I start out with very, very easy things for people so they can have success immediately. And what I do is I teach people to be quick and accurate with their right and left hand and their right and left foot, and they're constantly training their right and left hand and their right and left foot to do new, novel things right up until the day they die. The day before they die or the day they die, people are learning or practicing new things with their right and left hand and their right and left foot. And that's what I can't find it anywhere in literature that's what we're to do, but that's what we did when we were hunter-gatherers. Each day was a novel, or every other day was new or novel. We did everything as a hunter-gatherers. We could build our shelter. Each person could build a shelter, could get food, gather food for themselves, could get a little animal, a rabbit or something, and kill it, skin it, and prepare it to eat. Make shelters, make clothing. Each of us could do all that today, and today most of us can do none of it. And so what I do is I've come up with all these simple, easy little things with marbles and ping pong balls and tennis balls and jacks and chopsticks and plumbing parts and bottles and all the different things that I do and teach, and I just start out real easy for people to upright a bottle with first their right foot and then their left foot, a real easy bottle, and then pick more difficult bottles. A big plastic Coke bottle is very difficult, especially if it's windy and you're outside. And then to pick them all up with your right foot and then your left foot, and to take something like a cafeteria tray that's got sides, borders all around it. You can see if you spill water on it, it's not going to go off if you keep it upright. That kind of a cafeteria tray, plastic, and put a big lines across the thing, across one way and across the other way, meeting in the center, and then a big 11-inch circle in it, and put a tennis ball on that. And then, sitting in a chair, have the tennis ball follow those lines. And then stand up, but stand up close to something to where you can grab a hold if you're going to lose your balance or lean on something. And then as you gain more skill, freestand. And now how quickly can you do it? And now begin to stand on one foot and roll that tennis ball around on those lines. And now take an eye patch and cover one eye. In other words, Or so, here's something that really, really illustrates how you would ratchet up the difficulty of something that starts out relatively easily. Take a board 10 inches wide and 2 feet long, and put something that's going to be dimensionally stable for like a piece of half-inch plywood from Baltic birch plywood or something like that, that's going to last you a long time and be stable all the time, not move much. And put it on the floor with a book under one end. And now you have a little ramp. Okay, now standing next to a chair with your hand on that chair, pick up a marble. And you've practiced picking up marbles before because that guy Jepson had you sitting in the chair, practice picking them up, dropping them in a bowl, and then take that bowl and put them up on the seat of a chair, and then take that bowl and put it up on a table. Keep ratcheting up the difficulty as you become more dexterous, as you gain greater capability with these various tasks, various games, and that's it. You figure out what you want to practice with your right and left hand that's going to be new to you. That guy Jepson, he does this or that about it. Well, you can make up your own things, or they can do what I do. Anyway, getting back to this marble ramp. So you pick up a marble and you drop it down on the ramp. You have learned to pick up marble with both feet. Anyway, you're standing next to a chair with your hand on the chair so you don't fall over. And then pick up a marble, and then now quickly. And the marble's going real slow because you've got a tiny little book under it, and it rolls down this ramp very slow, and you catch it with the other foot. Now put it back at the top and drop it with that foot. Now catch it with the other foot. Okay, now put another book under the ramp. Now put another book under it. Now put another book. I can jack that ramp up to where almost nobody could do it the first time, even if they're a professional athlete, just because I've practiced. But you just keep jacking up you do something that's fun and that's relatively easy in the beginning, and you ratchet, as you begin to have success, you ratchet up I train people's balance, stability, and coordination. And what results from that is their memory, their creativity, their mood improve. They become younger in their attitude, younger in how they move, younger in how they feel. It's like yoga, man. Jepson's got something like yoga, except the difference might be that yoga goes on for 20, 30 years, and you go through the same moves, which are wonderful for you, but I am constantly introducing the novel for the hands and feet to do something new. Now you know everything I know.
Yeah, it's interesting, your idea of asymmetrical training, right and left separate. There's more and more research, just very new research coming out about the benefits of that in terms of neuroprotective benefits. A lot of people don't realize that neurological disease is one of the top 3-4 killers of people, heart disease, cancer, and then it's usually neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's.
I can guarantee people won't get that. Lucas, I can guarantee people if they do what I share and teach, they won't get that. And have you ever heard that Alzheimer's starts as a disease 30 years before you show any symptoms?
Correct. Yeah, I have heard that. Yeah.
Okay. Now somebody is 65 years old and they begin to get dementia, and they're practicing my kind of stuff, but they're beginning to get dementia at 65, and they're going along and not showing any symptoms, but they're beginning to get this, and they grow to be they get to be 87 or 92. They fall in the kitchen, hit their head on the corner of a table, and die in a day or two of a catastrophic brain injury. Or at the similar age, they get pneumonia and they're dead in 2-3 days. And you beat it. They beat it. They beat the disease. If you never have any symptoms of Alzheimer's or dementia, I don't care how corrupt your brain is. If you don't have any symptoms, it doesn't make any difference. And what Jepson does is he creates this astounding amount of redundancy, of surplus, of extra in the brain. That's what I'm all about. You get that. You begin to have dementia at 65 or 72 or whatever, and live to another 20 years just practicing what Jepson. You're not going to even show any symptoms.
Interesting. And so, I've heard of people, the more and more research, people are using this asymmetrical training, exactly what you've been talking about for years. People are starting to use this to treat symptoms of Alzheimer's. So even, preventative, of course, is the best, but even for people listening who are already experiencing cognitive decline, this asymmetrical right and left brain separate training, asymmetrical training, people are using things like boxing, one arm and then the other arm, like you're talking about training the right side and the left side. Really, really interesting. And I think, you've stumbled upon something that's going to become much, much more important as neuro research advances in the years to come.
Well, they asked me to give a TED Talk in Cyprus. Nobody in literature has connected the dots the way I have connected them. I can guarantee that people are not going to get Alzheimer's and dementia and possibly Parkinson's. I go to the hospital and I speak to Parkinson people, and the first thing these Parkinson people do here in Florida at these meetings is they go around the room and they all talk about, these are ambulatory Parkinson people. They're not, they come and they happen to meet in a hospital meeting room, but they came from someplace else and they're driven there and they got a life. They're doing stuff. Anyway, they all say that physical activity that is the single best thing for them. You're aware of have you ever heard of Ragbrai?
No.
Okay, Ragbrai. It's a bicycle ride across Iowa. It's the largest sanctioned bicycle ride in the world. And they have 10,000 people. They get $200 a piece for 10,000 people. And we ride from the Missouri River on the western side of Iowa. I was born and raised in Iowa, but I live in Florida now. But anyway, I drove back there to do it. At first time at 69, and the second time it's a 450-mile ride across Iowa. But you dip your back tire in the Missouri, and you ride across Iowa, and you dip your front tire in the Mississippi. Anyway, there was a doctor who took a friend, a female friend, a male doctor took a female friend with symptoms of Parkinson, palsy. She had palsy, and she sat on the back of a tandem, and this doctor rode her across Iowa. It's not a race. It's just a long ride. We ride anywhere from 75, 80, 90 miles a day. Anyway, and when she got off the bicycle, before she got on the bicycle, she had palsy, and after a week on the bicycle, she got off the bicycle. She didn't have palsy anymore. She didn't have the symptoms. She didn't have the symptoms anymore, and I read about another case where an elderly gentleman walks into the doctor's office. This is a place where you can walk into the doctor's office from the street. The door is on the street, it's in a mall or something like that. He opens the door, walks in, and he's just this older guy walks in, and he's really got pretty palsy. He can hardly move around there very good there. And anyway, he goes in the doctor's office and sees the doctor and goes back out through the door, leaves the doctor's office, and the nurse comes out and says, "Come here, everybody. I want you to watch what that old man does." And he gets on a bicycle, and his palsy completely goes away, and he just rides off on his bicycle. Anyway, it's newly discovered. So you're dead on. You're absolutely right with this bilateral symmetrical training is absolutely crucial. And that's what if people say, what 3 things can I do right now that ain't going to cost me a nickel that I can do and I'll notice some difference? And I say, I have a stand-up desk. Begin to practice balancing on one foot. You start out by next to a chair or something. I don't want anybody calling me up and saying, "I'm going to sue your ass, Jepson, because you told me to balance on one foot." Stand next to a wall or a chair and start out that way. And then begin to use your non-dominant hand to wash your hair and eat and everything. And use your non-dominant hand every single time. And if they want to really, that's going to absolutely supercharge their brain. There is nothing that enriches the brain faster than learning something new with the hands and feet, the body, physical, because that's what we did when a newborn baby is. You take a newborn baby, and just born today or yesterday, and you put the baby face down very gently on a table. We can't even lift our head up off the table. At 9 months, most of us can walk. At 2, most of us can quick step and go upstairs and downstairs and spin around and kick a ball. We spend the next 12 years of our lives, and we did this as hunter-gatherers, but it was much more sophisticated then in a way. But we spent the next 10 or 12 years doing all this physical stuff, learning to skate, learning to run, learning to ride a bicycle, learning to play croquet, learning to swim, learning to play volleyball, badminton, blah, 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 on and on and on and on, all this physical stuff. It's what we have to do to be healthy. But we got to do it all the time. We got to do it at 50, at 48, at 32, at 67, at 92. Learning something new with the hands and feet, the body. When I say hands and feet, obviously it's going to be the body too.
Here's what drives me crazy, Stephen. I see a lot of people who buy into this idea of learning something new, but then they get out their smartphone and they play stupid mind games all day. It's like, why don't they just go out for a walk? Why don't they learn to juggle? Why don't they ride a skateboard? And I see older people in airports and in offices thinking that they're doing themselves a favor by playing video games. It's like, why would you do that when we have so many wonderful tools? I wonder what you think about these online games and smartphone games.
Did you already Google? You're funning me now. You Googled already what Stephen Jepson thinks of smartphones, because that's what they asked me. I was at a party in Denmark, and somebody asked me that question, and he smiled at me, and he said, "Stephen, would you say that again? Would you say that again?" And he whipped out a smartphone. He made a movie of it, and he put it on YouTube. I'm going to let your audience find out what Stephen Jepson thinks of smartphones. So that's what they got, not smartphones, cell phones, because that was the question that was asked. Because there are going to be what is called blowback or unintended consequences that are going to be so negative. I mean, they're good for crime scenes where there's a disagreement about what really happened, and they're good for if you're getting lost, and they're good for calling up Bill and saying, "Hey, Bill, I'm driving around, I'm coming over, let's have a beer." They're good for things like that, but all the rest of this stuff, what it does is it teaches you to play those games with your hands and with your little thumbs. I call cell phones little glowy thummies. Anyway, they are little glowy thummies.
Stephen, how long have you been training? Have you been doing this your whole life? Is this something you picked up after your career in ceramics? When I know a lot of these skills you've picked up much later in life, but have you always been an avid mover, physically active? When did you start?
Oh, Lucas, you are so good. Yeah, you do wonderful interviews. Because I love sharing this story, and I'm going to love sharing it with your audience. Well, when I was 8 years old in 1949, my father got me up at about 3 o'clock in the morning and took me down to watch Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey circus set up. They'd come to town overnight on a train. They had their whole they had a whole train for all their stuff. Have you ever heard of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Oh, are you an American?
Yes, I am.
Oh, I was going to say, why is your English so beautiful?
I'm American, just lost in the world. I've been living abroad for most of my life, but I'm still very American.
Oh, what you're doing is wonderful, kiddo. I think what you're doing is wonderful. Anyway, so I was 8 years old. My dad takes me down to the circus, and it takes him several hours. And the last thing they do is pull up the big top. It's a 3-ring circus under a canvas tent. They use the elephants. They use everything. I was 8 years old. I had never seen such a thing. I had never seen a circus or circus performers. And that afternoon, my mom and dad, about 4 o'clock, took me to the circus. So, and one of the things that happened was this little vehicle pulls out into the front of everybody in the circus. It comes from backstage, and all these guys pile out of this little thing. Clowns. I've never seen a clown before. I'd never saw such thing. And then one of them begins to juggle, and I thought, oh my goodness, what is that? I'd never seen anybody juggle before, but I said to myself, and I didn't say it out loud to anybody, I said, I can do that. I can do that. And then so a little bit later, from behind a curtain, out comes a clown on a unicycle. And I said, wow, man. I said to myself, I didn't tell anybody, but I said to myself, I can do that. And I can, and I teach it. And regarding juggling, I can, and I teach it. And so I'm watching a little bit later, and here comes Rolando the Magnificent. This little diminutive guy, and he's wearing tights, and he's got a cape on, and it says across the back, Rolando the Magnificent. He offs that cape and scampers up this little ladder that's about 50 feet off the ground or whatever it is. Looked pretty high to me. I was a kid. And he tight ropes walking. It's the first time I'd ever seen anything like that in my life. And I said to myself, I can do that. And I teach it. All those things. And then I went later to the sideshow where I saw a guy throwing a knife, and the woman came out and she got this big thing, the disc he could spin around, and he threw a knife. I can do that. And when I've practiced, I can throw a knife with my right hand and my left hand, releasing from both of them at the same time, and they come together at a target at about 12 to 14 feet, the size of a dime.
Stephen, for people listening, we have a lot of people who are thinking they're feeling cognitive decline already, and they might be in their 30s or their 40s, but definitely people, listeners in their 50s and 60s, a lot of them just don't feel as sharp as they used to, and they're not happy about it. And so you have, from what I understand, I've seen some videos, it seems like you have some great land and sunshine and access to a big play area. I get a lot of people who are stuck in small apartments in big cities. What should people do if they have limited time, limited space? They want to do what you're doing. They want to get back in touch with play, both just for the pure joy of it, but also to get their mind and their body sharp again like they were young. How would you recommend people get started if they have a limited time and limited space?
Just to begin to learn to begin to eat if they're only marginally good with chopsticks. In other words, if the only time they ever eat with chopsticks are when they're at an Asian restaurant and they're served Asian food and that's all there's on the table is chopsticks, and they can do it, they can manage with now learn to do it with your left hand, but things that they can do at home, learn to balance on one foot. When up until, I don't know, in my late 50s, 60s, I could stand on one foot and put my arms out the side so I didn't lose my balance, and I could bring my knee up to my nose, and I am just beginning to do that again at 76 years old. Standing out in the middle of the room on the floor on one foot, and I bring my right knee or my left knee, one at a time, of course, and but just make up some little games, some little things. Begin to use both hands and begin to train. By the way, our feet are just as trainable as our hands are. Your audience can Google what people with no arms, so thalidomide people or people who've lost their arms horribly in an accident, see what they can do with their feet. Have you ever seen that?
I have. They can play piano, they can paint, they can write. It's phenomenal.
Yes. So the feet are just as trainable as the hands. The feet are, and with no thumb. I watched a man on video repair his automobile, and then I watched him thread a quarter-inch nut. You know, that's a little tiny nut on a 6-inch long quarter-inch bolt with his feet. Didn't have any arms.
Stephen, what are you optimizing for? Like when you do all this, aside from the pure joy, which everyone can hear radiating through your voice, but are you looking to live forever? Are you looking to just live the most full life? Yeah. What do you think about when you think about, with the point of all this?
In front of my audience, I say my parents were both dead when they hit the floor, and then the audience gasps, and I say, both of them lived long, healthy, wonderful lives. They cooked meals and drove their car the day before they died. In other words, I ask my audiences, how long do you want to live in a nursing home at the end of your life? And I hope they say, well, I don't, or they're very shortly. And then I ask my audience, how long do you want to be sick at the end of your lives? I say sedentary behavior is a long, slow slide to a nasty, ever-sickening death. You've got to be active if you want to remain healthy. It's the single most important thing people do is to remain active. And then what that guy Jepson does is he enriches the brain to forestall or put off getting any symptoms of Alzheimer's, dementia, or Parkinson.
And so what about your peer group? I'm curious. You live in Florida, which I lived in Florida briefly as well. And I've also lived in other parts of the world and parts of the country where the population was aging. And I know that my grandparents, who they're born and raised in Duluth, Minnesota, and they moved for the second part of their life down to Florida. And at some point, they had to leave because they felt like their peer group was aging and slowing down so much, they felt like it was aging them. I'm curious, do you feel that pressure from your peer group? Have you figured out ways to hack your peer group so that, you don't feel like you're falling into the status quo, which unfortunately, the status quo is a very steady, rapid decline in terms of activity and energy and enthusiasm in life. How do you deal with this? How do you address this in your life?
As I said, I want to die like my parents do. I want to die precipitously, having lived pretty actively right up until the day I die. I just want the old heart to give out, and boom, dead. Lifestyle. My friends, many of them. I'm 77 years old, and so my friends mostly are 70 up in their years, and so a lot of them, the ones that I'm really friendly with, are still pretty active. They train dogs and go out hunting with them and things like that, Lucas. If a person wants to see some changes right away, begin to practice balancing on one foot using their non-dominant hand. and stand up rather than sit down a lot. Remotes are killing us. Our remotes. We got a remote for the fan. We got a remote for the TV. We got a remote for the heat. We got a remote for the cold. We got a remote for the door. We got a remote for the gate. We got a remote to start the car. We got a remote for the dog. We got a remote for the cat. But anyway, we don't have to move anymore. I got another thing that you probably already know about, but your audience may not. Astronauts, when they go out, do we already talk about this?
No, tell me.
Okay, astronauts, when they go out into space, every one of them, right down to the last person, is in excellent physical health. They're in good shape. They go out. Okay, so they go out in space, and some of them stay for months at a time, half a year even. And if you stay out for longer than 6 months, it takes you 2.5 days to get well for every day you're out. But anyway, so the people are out in space. They come back in that little space capsule, and they land in the water or on land. And when they get out of that space capsule, they cannot even walk. Those guys can't walk. They take them away in a wheelchair or a gurney. They go right back to what they were doing: pitching horseshoes, ice skating, roller skating, riding horseback, playing handball, riding a bicycle. They go right back to doing whatever they were doing to get in that wonderful shape when they went out in space. And what happens?
Not sure. Does it work?
Perfect. It works. They get right back into the same shape.
Right. So they have this expectation of themselves, so they fulfill on it, right?
Right. But the implication is we can all, at any time, turn back the clock.
Sure.
We can all be sedentary and at any moment in time begin to do something new that is going to be so healthy for us. That's all. That's what this guy Jepson does.
Stephen, talk to me about slips and falls, because this is a huge thing that I think most people don't really realize until they're in their later years as a big risk factor. Talk about slips and falls and talk about what you're doing, how this can help prevent what sounds like something that's just totally random but can be a huge cause of mortality.
It is. That's what got me started in this whole thing. A number of years ago, I read CDC. Do you know CDC figures on falling? Okay, well, I'll tell your audience something that you already know that they may not know. And last year, in America, over the age of 65, these are very close to the numbers. They are real. They're not to the exact number because I don't remember the exact number, but they're real close to the number. Anyway, last year in America, 2 million people over the age of 65 fell down and went to the emergency room. Of those people over 65 who fell down and went to the emergency room, a certain percentage had broken their hip. If you are over 65 and you break a hip, 20% of that number is going to be dead in a year, and 80% of the remaining number are never going to live alone again. I thought, oh my God, here I am in my 60s, tightrope walking and doing all this other stuff. I can help those people. I can help train their balance. I can help them. And so I began to study, and I went to older folks, and then I found that juggling study that they did in Germany and was replicated in England years ago. I read about that, and that's what got me on this hand and foot training to how it enriches the brain and how it will absolutely put off the symptoms of aging. Oh, and that's another thing I talk to people about. Imagine an 8-year-old child, and you're an uncle or an interested person talking to this young child, and the child has a little library in their room, and they've got Ivanhoe and Alice in Wonderland and the Bobbsey Twins and just different books that children would have in their little library. And you ask them to go into their library and get Alice in Wonderland. And they go into the room and they come right out with the book and put it in your hands. Okay, now here you are at 72, and you've had all these years to acquire this library in your noggin of millions of experiences, millions of books, millions of things, and you've got miles of corridor to walk down to retrieve some of these different things, metaphorically, of course. And so somebody asks you about something that you actually did experience and do know about that happened to you when you were 14 or 10 or 27 or whatever, and you're 72, and it is going to take you some time, unless you've been dealing with it on a regular basis, it's going to take you some time to retrieve that information. Well, sometimes it takes a minute or two, sometimes it takes 10 hours, but boom, all of a sudden that answer comes right to your brain. You've turned it on to the... That's all it is. This senior moment is totally crap. To do that to a person, say, I'm having a senior moment. No. It's just retrieval has been made so much more difficult because the fact that you're trying to retrieve is recorded so long ago, and that's completely understandable. Little children's memories are just as bad as 80-year-olds or 72 or 65 or whatever age. They go to school, they forget to bring their lunch box home, their lunch pail home, they forget to bring their homework home, they forget to bring their computer home, they leave their smartphone at school, they forget their jacket at school, they forget this, they forget that. Children's memory, everybody's memory is wonderful.
I love it, Stephen. So you're traveling, you're speaking. I know you have a video program, you have a website. For people listening who would like to learn from you, would like to stay connected with you, where's the best place for them to go to connect with you?
Well, there's this wonderful guy named Lucas, and he's gonna promote himself, but he's gonna, as an added, he's going to be the main event, but as an important speaker, he's going to have a guy named Jepson come along, and I get out and I pose the problem, and then I travel with a suitcase full of 50 pounds of my toys and games and playings, and I show them what they can do, and I encourage them to imagine what they can do and create of their own, make it fun, make it easy, and start easy, and that's what Jepson does. And I go through all these games, dozens and dozens, right on stage, right in front of everybody.
Stephen, I love what you're doing. You're an inspiration. I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of this. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Keep doing what you're doing, and I hope you and I can stay in touch for the future. One of the most common trouble areas for yoga students is their hips. People complain about tight hips and tight hamstrings probably more than any other spot on their body. The reason our hips are so tight in Western culture is because we never sit on the floor, we almost never squat down. In fact, our range of motion in terms of our hip flexion and extension is so shockingly limited that by the time most people are in their 20s, they can't really sit on the floor cross-legged comfortably. Their back's all hunched up and their knees are way up off the ground. And this affects all kinds of things. It affects your standing posture, your running gait, of course your ability to do yoga. Probably half the poses in yoga demand a certain degree of hip mobility. And it also leaves you susceptible to injuries. If you have dysfunctional movement patterns, if your posture is wonky, you can't really lift weight up off the ground. You can't really move like a fully functional human. So it's really important to open up your hips. It just feels great also. You're more comfortable when you travel. You can get through yoga classes more comfortably. You'll also find all different movement practices, whether you're weightlifting in the gym, out for a run, or just doing anything that you might like to do for fun, like skateboarding or surfing or whatever it is just easier when your hips are open. A lot of people don't even realize how blocked they are. I get a lot of questions. We teach a pose called Blaster in our Gravity Yoga series that's very popular. In any case, a lot of people want to come take my classes. I usually just teach training courses these days, so I'm not that accessible, which is a shame. I'd like to do more public classes, but I'm traveling, I'm teaching, I'm writing, I'm doing these podcasts, and I don't have much time. In an attempt to make myself more accessible and to connect with my listeners, I'm doing a 21-day hip opening challenge. It's a private program. It's available on Instagram in a private group. It's really simple. I know you already have Instagram. You just sign up for the program, you join through the app, and every day you'll practice with me live on video. I will share with you my best hip opening stretches. I'll answer questions. We'll talk about anatomy. I'll show you some bones and some anatomical stuff to think about and show you how to do gravity yoga breathing and practices to really open up your hips. Now, in 21 days, the question is, can I really make progress? And the answer is absolutely. You'll make huge progress. But even more importantly, you'll set the stage for some really massive transformations. When it comes to mobility, usually about 80% of the gains you'll ever make are made in the first year, and usually about half of those gains are made in the first month. So it's really big gains. You'll notice it right away, and it's pretty fun as well. Hip opening poses are really intense and very rewarding as well. I usually do it right before bed or in the evening because the breathing that we do with gravity yoga tends to put you to sleep. In any case, to learn more, go to yogabody.com. Scroll down, you'll see upcoming courses, the 21-day hip opening challenge. I hope you can join me. This week's nutritional tip is in response to a listener question. Listener Jason on Instagram says, Lucas, you never talk about fiber. I've heard you talk about just about everything else in terms of nutrition. How much fiber should I be taking, and does it matter if it's soluble or insoluble? Thanks. So Jason, you're right. I almost never talk about fiber, mostly because I eat so much of it, I just don't really think about it. But fiber is a big problem. They estimate that your average American needs like 15 grams of fiber per day. And they estimate that like our caveman, our Paleolithic, Neolithic ancestors probably ate like 50 or more grams per day. So we're probably under-eating fiber pretty dramatically. And then people will say, yeah, but I'm having regular bowel movements. Should I care? And the answer is we don't really know, but it seems like fiber, especially insoluble fiber, probably is very helpful for feeding your microflora, the bugs that live in your gut. But the reality is we don't know that much about the microflora, the microbiome. I've had a number of people on the show, you might recall, talking about this, but I'm not really convinced in the science. For sure it's there. There's like 3 pounds of bugs in your gut, and there are more bacteria cells in terms of sheer quantity than there are human cells in your body. They just are very tiny. So there's no question about that. There's a bunch of bacteria, but which ones are good, which ones are bad, how do we balance them? That seems like a much bigger question mark than anyone hasn't been able to answer so far. But probably it's a good bet to have both soluble and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber is the one that dissolves in water. So for example, if you soak some flax seeds in water, the kind of jelly stuff, that's soluble, and the insoluble stuff is the stuff that doesn't, like psyllium husk, just kind of blasts right through you. And there's pretty good indication that we need both of them. I'm not a big fan of supplementing with fiber because you can become dependent on it and it can actually irritate your gut. And it's also a really good excuse to eat more vegetables. If you're struggling with fiber intake, I try to eat 30 to 50 grams per day, but I don't keep track of it at all. But I should say I aim for 30 to 50 grams per day. And the simplest way to add fiber to your diet if you're lacking is simply to eat more nuts and seeds, to eat more beans if beans work for you. Or the even simpler option that I often recommend is to cut up celery, carrots, cucumbers, soak them in salt water, just like a little saline solution, put them in the refrigerator, and use those as snacks. They're refreshing and delicious, and you'll find yourself accidentally eating 10, 20 grams of fiber a day just by snacking on those guys. So fiber is definitely something to think about, and I just don't talk about it only selfishly because I tend to eat so much of it, but it keeps you really satiated. It's correlated with heart health and healthy cholesterol levels and all kinds of other wonderful things, including bowel movements and healthy gut microflora and things like this. In terms of how exactly to manage it, not really sure, but for sure we should try to be eating plenty of it, and ideally from food sources, not supplements. Hope that helps. We have a listener question this week from Bella on Instagram. Bella says, Lucas, I'm new to meditation, have tried some of the apps like Headspace and Calm, but I'm not really into them. I would like to go to a meditation retreat. Can you recommend something? What styles are best for a beginner? If you go online or if you go to Amazon, it'll seem like there are hundreds of different meditation techniques. I don't really think that's true. I think they're mostly the same. And I'll share with you the 3 types of meditation that I find most prevalent, and other things I would think would fall under categories that I would call yoga nidra, or I would call hypnosis, or I would call visualization. But the 3 types that I have experienced and I see popping up more frequently, with potentially different brand names and different titles and different teachers, but pretty much the same thing. The first one would be called Joppa meditation or mantra meditation, where you repeat a phrase that usually rhymes with Om. So something like Om Shalom Rarom, and you say that again and again and again. And this is sometimes verbalized, but usually it's spoken silently in your head. So a practitioner would sit for 20 minutes, for example, and say Om, 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 or Amen, Amen, Amen. Same kind of idea in their head. And this is Transcendental Meditation. And because the Transcendental Meditation organization is quite large and quite famous and quite influential, this has become a very popular technique. A lot of people say it's really accessible also. For whatever reason, it doesn't work for me. It makes me really anxious. I've never really connected with it, but it's one of the more popular styles. The next style of meditation that you'll find is single-pointed focus meditation, where you might be focusing on your breath, you might be focusing on your heart center, you might be focusing on your third eye, you might be focusing on your heartbeat, and you might be focusing on the sensations of your scalp. Attempting to focus on one thing, that single-pointed focus type of meditation, shows up in a lot of different things that might be called Anapana meditation, all different terms for it. And then the final type is kind of open monitoring meditation. And this is where the practitioner is attempting to just be present with whatever comes up, whatever feeling, whatever thought, rather than trying to focus attention, just trying to be attentive to whatever shows up. Now, as soon as I say this, I'll have people emailing me telling me this is heresy, and there are hundreds of different meditations, and they do meditation with Guru Dev, and it's like this, and you have to say this word and spin in a circle and pat your head. And I understand that there's a lot of dogma and religious trappings and mantra and all this kind of stuff, but from my experience, that's mostly what I've seen. And most of the other stuff I would put in a different category, like guided visualization, like hypnosis. I would call some of it yoga breathing, pranayama. And so with that in mind, I'd encourage you to find a retreat that resonates with you, because all these practices are more similar than different, and try to find one that connects with you, meaning one that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable, one that feels like people who share your values are going to, and connect with people there. I personally have gone to Vipassana meditation centers, which were originally founded by S.N. Goenka, who I was actually fortunate enough to meet before he passed away. I did a 3-day sit with him in Shelburne Falls in Massachusetts many, many years ago. And I like that organization because it's secular. They don't charge anything. It's all donation based, and there's absolutely no frills. The people who don't like it often dislike it for all the reasons that I like it. It's very stoic, and there's really not that much to it. But you can check them out at Dhamma, D-H-A-M-M-A, Dhamma.org. Hope that's helpful. Thanks for listening to The Lucas Rockwood Show. If you enjoy the podcast, I have 2 asks of you. Number 1, share the show on social media with your friends and tag me. My handle is @LucasRockwood. Number 2 is please leave a rating and review in whatever app you're listening on. And last but not least, before you go, if you'd like to be on my mailing list, every week I send out information about the podcast, behind the scenes stuff, announcements of online classes and special events. I email about once a week. You can do that at yogabody.com/sign me up. And right now we have a free breathing worksheet on that page as well. It's yogabody.com/sign me up. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.